Okay, so the next question that we had was, where do you start when putting a PMO in place? Now, this is a great question. Again, these are real questions, by the way, Graham, because I know.
I was going to say this.
Not only do you do this as a living, but you've also taught on this subject as well, haven't you? So,
well, I was going to say the very first place you could is come along to the setting of a PMO course, my PMO learning. The trainer in that is absolutely. Oh, it's me. They're really good. Yeah. So where to start? So the real, and possibly alluded to this already with some of the previous questions. The starting point is, what's the business challenge, or what's the challenge that's vexing the leadership group of a business the most? It really does need to be top down. What is the business facing, looking into? What is it trying to? Where's it want to be in a year, 3 years, 5 years? What is the strategy? Ideally, what sort of strategic objectives are there? Okay, so do we want to have one wide corporate sort of, well, the entire company portfolio office? Actually, are we just looking at one very big, really key critical program for the business? All of those things will start to lead you down first of those scenarios would be a portfolio office. Second of those would be a program office. So it's really driven from what's the business challenge, and what, because you are designing a function from scratch, a PMO, you can kind of design the optimal solution. Now, always remember, again, with world events, that what might be optimal now or a plan for a year's time may not be quite what's required in 3 years. So it's a plan that shouldn't sit and gather dust on a shelf. It should be a plan that you iterate regularly. It could even be a plan that has a series of stepping stones or phases or transition states, whatever you use in your vernacular, where okay, so what's really important is to support this very big program. Okay, so let's create a program office for that. Let's make it 1.5 times resourced, so that half of that resource can be using some of what they're learning and developing for the program office. We could fold that into some sort of program management framework for the business, because that doesn't exist yet. And then the PMO manager, if you had one, okay, so they could take on the role of the beginnings of some sort of portfolio office that reports on the program, but starts to delve into some of the functions and some of the other strategic change. So yeah, it comes top down, and then good design. If I had been engaged to set that up, I'd want to make sure I had really good sponsorship at top of the house level, board level, director level, whatever the top of the house is. Doesn't really matter who that is, but as long as they are director, board level, and will champion your cause and will give you the best chance of success. Because let's be honest, some of the future conversations, if you set up that PMO structure and design correctly, could be quite challenging conversations. I.e., why are we still letting people sit on this project when we said 2 weeks ago or 3 meetings ago it's canned? Because I'll tell you why, because it's pet project for such and such, and you'll need your sponsor to go, we don't do pet projects, we agreed the criteria, we follow the criteria. It's not criteria and then have a chat, it's criteria. And that's what the portfolio office owns. So some of those conversations could be quite challenging. So really important that you have good senior level sponsorship.
I think one of the things we've learned recently in a number of sessions at the PMO conference, where there's been a few actually case studies where they've won PMO of the Year awards, so they're doing pretty good. But some of the insights that I tend to remembered, and again we'll put these on screen, the ones that you can go away and actually watch, where they talked about exactly what you've talked about, Graham, where they've got to that level where it's come from the top, what's the strategic objectives, then what's the objective of the PMO, and then you're going down that route of like, okay, so how are we going to be able to offer services that will meet that mandate, and then they talked about putting in place roadmaps, which seem to work really well, because it's the other side of this is that the PMO, when it's getting set up and being put in place, you need to make sure that everybody else knows what steps are along the way, so making it really visual and getting people bought into it, because it's it can come from the top.
Yeah,
PMO's doing some great work, and then you've got project managers, change managers, BAs, planners, everybody else who's involved in change also needs to understand what's going on. And it just struck me as that a lot of the recent case studies and they've gone down that route of, here's the roadmap, we're doing it in a kind of rolling wave planning type, we'll do this, then we'll set the next bit and all of that. And there's some really good examples that you can dip into as well.
Yeah. I would, to add to that, depending on the size of your PMO, you probably should run it as a project or a program, and you should follow the same disciplines that you want every other project program that follows you to run. And yes, you're absolutely right. There's what I've kind of is how I set up the function, but there is a huge amount of effort in hearts and minds, people side of this, bringing, as we had on the top, one of the other questions, the PM with 20 years experience that's never done it the way we want to do it before, I'm not going to play. There's all sorts of interpersonal people dynamics that need to be managed along the way. Roadmaps, transition states, change management. How are you going to implement a PM framework? That's a change management piece. Yeah, absolutely.
Big subject, but then again, lots of people like yourself out there doing it for organizations today, and the fact that you are doing it and been doing it for a while just goes to show that it's not an easy thing.
Yeah, and perhaps we should say that there is a lot of quite a lot of science around PPM and project management offices and portfolio and value management offices and agile and waterfall. But we also have to be pragmatic and apply some common sense. There is no real right and wrong answer to that question, where to start. It's about understanding the organization in which you are operating, their challenges, and what's going to be pragmatic, fit for purpose. And additionally, I would say, look at MVPs. What's the minimum viable product of a PMO? Don't try and go guns blazing all at once, right? What moves the needle? What 20% of effort in terms of PMO setup can create 80% of the benefit? And then never try and do the 20% on top, right? Because what's the point? Just do MVP over and over and over.
Yeah, well, you've said yourself, you talked about poo and pots. I don't know if you explained it, but poo's obviously PMO of one, as in one person or two people, pots. But you can't do it all. So you've actually got to really...
You have to pick and choose and provide a level of service that you can do amazingly well to gain support and people to follow you. But that by definition limits the breadth of what you're doing. Absolutely. But there is no right and wrong. It has to be the right answer for that organization at that moment in time.
And that's why you come along to out of PMO events where you can just chat about this with other people.
Correct. And find you're not the only one with the same problem that you think you have, because everybody else is in the same place, or half of the audience are in the same place.
Yeah, absolutely.